September 14th, 2019. Las Vegas, Nevada. Morty Smith received a call just after dawn. The voice on the other end was clipped and professional. Human resources from Silverlake Federal Reserve. They needed someone to cover the graveyard janitorial shift. The previous cleaner had quit without notice, and they were desperate. Morty had been working odd jobs around the city for nearly 15 years. Office buildings, casinos, warehouses. His reputation as a reliable, invisible worker had spread through the network of facility managers who never bothered to learn his name. He didn't think much about the details when he first took the job. It was just another shift, another paycheck. But when he saw the building for the first time, something stirred in the back of his mind, a recognition he couldn't quite name. Morty confirmed the start date and drove to the facility later that afternoon for orientation. He knew the general area. He'd passed the unmarked complex several times on his way to other jobs, but he'd never paid attention to what happened inside those reinforced concrete walls. After parking in the employee lot, he walked through the security checkpoint, surrendering his phone and personal belongings. The orientation supervisor, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Okonkwo, explained his duties with the exhausted efficiency of someone who'd given this speech 100 times. The facility processed currency, billions of dollars cycled through weekly, and cleanliness wasn't just about appearances. It was about security, contamination control, and operational integrity. The tour was brief. Patricia walked him through the main corridors, pointing out the executive offices, break rooms, and processing floors. She showed him the supply closets, the industrial cleaning equipment, and the strict protocols for handling waste. When they reached the security room, Morty paused. Through the reinforced glass partition, he could see monitors displaying camera feeds from every corner of the building. A board security guard, his name tag read Thomas Yates, glanced up, nodded at Patricia, then returned to his coffee. She didn't linger. "You won't need to clean in there," she said. "Security handles their own space." But Morty had already seen what mattered. The control panels, the vault rotation schedule displayed on a digital board, the timestamps blinking in steady rhythm. Patricia seemed satisfied with his silence. She hired him on the spot, $10.50 an hour, graveyard shift, Sunday through Thursday. As he walked back to his car, Morty's mind began working in ways it hadn't in years. He didn't have any particular plans. The job was just survival, a way to keep the lights on in his cramped studio apartment, and maybe save enough to send his daughter Rita something for her birthday, though she probably wouldn't accept it. But the more he thought about the layout of the building, the restricted areas he'd glimpsed, the casual trust Patricia had already placed in him, the more he realized something fundamental. Nobody really sees the janitor. Morty returned to Silverlake Federal Reserve 3 nights later for his first official shift. His focus was supposed to be simple: empty trash bins, mop floors, sanitize bathrooms, restock supplies. He moved methodically through his assigned zones, pushing his cleaning cart down sterile hallways lit by fluorescent tubes that hummed like distant machinery. The building operated on skeleton crew during graveyard hours, a handful of security guards, one supervisor, occasional night shift processors finishing paperwork. During the first week, Morty didn't think about anything beyond the work itself. He learned the rhythms of the building, the sounds that marked each hour, the patterns of patrol routes and shift changes. But as the days accumulated into weeks, he started noticing things that didn't quite fit. The security protocols were rigorous on the surface: cameras, access controls, vault rotations on precise schedules. But beneath that structure were gaps. Human gaps. Thomas Yates always took his 3 a.m. coffee break at exactly the same time, disappearing for 12 minutes. Patricia trusted Morty completely after the second week, barely glancing up when he pushed his cart past her office. And the vault system itself, which he'd overheard Vincent Reeves, the chief operations manager, complaining about during a hallway conversation, had a flaw. A timing gap during rotation cycles when the new quantum encryption software caused synchronization delays. Morty had worked with complex systems before, not security systems, but assembly lines, machinery, processes that required attention to detail and an understanding of how things broke down. What interested him most wasn't the technology itself, but the maintenance override. During vault rotations, when Vault C7 went offline for the 10-minute window required to reset the encryption sequence, the entire chamber became electronically dark. No cameras recording, no alarms active, no digital paper trail. It was designed for system integrity, a scheduled blind spot that maintenance crews could theoretically exploit if they knew the override codes. Morty had found those codes 3 weeks into his employment, printed on a discarded maintenance log someone had left in a recycling bin outside the security office. He'd memorized the 12-digit sequence without thinking, the same way he memorized which floors needed mopping on which nights, which bathrooms required extra supplies. It was just information, filed away in the same mental space where he kept a lifetime of forgettable details. But now, standing in the dim service corridor at 2:47 a.m. with his cleaning cart squeaking softly beside him, Morty looked through the reinforced glass at Vault C7 and saw something he'd been trained his entire life not to see: opportunity. Morty's routine at Silverlake Federal Reserve had become muscle memory by his second month. Badge scan at 10:04 p.m. Retrieve cart from supply closet B7. Start with executive offices on the 3rd floor. Empty trash, vacuum carpets, wipe down conference tables still scattered with classified documents he wasn't supposed to read but nobody bothered to secure. By midnight, he'd moved to the processing floors where day shift workers left behind coffee cups and sandwich wrappers. The high security areas came last. Corridors near the vault chambers where he mopped floors that never seemed dirty and polished door handles that gleamed under fluorescent light. The security guards changed shifts at 2 a.m. They scanned his badge coming and going, watched him push his cart through checkpoints, nodded with the vacant politeness people reserve for furniture. Thomas Yates had worked the graveyard rotation for 6 years and still called him the new guy. Patricia Okonkwo trusted him enough to leave her office unlocked when she made her rounds. Nobody remembered his face well enough to pick him out of a lineup. Morty had perfected invisibility the way other men perfected golf swings or card tricks, through repetition, through understanding that the secret wasn't trying to hide, but simply failing to register as worth noticing. He knew every corner of the building by feel now. The forgotten storage room on sublevel 2, where old equipment gathered dust. The service elevator that bypassed the main security desk. The blind spot near the south corridor where construction scaffolding blocked the camera's view, installed 4 months ago for repairs that kept getting delayed. He noticed these things the way invisible people always do, cataloging details that mattered to no one, including himself. The phone call came on a Tuesday night during his break. Morty almost didn't answer. The number was Jolene's, and they hadn't spoken in 8 months, not since Rita's last birthday, when he'd sent a card she never acknowledged. But something in the late hour made him pick up. "It's Rita," Jolene said without preamble. Her voice carried the particular exhaustion of someone who'd been crying in hospital waiting rooms. Stage 3 lymphoma. Spread to her bone marrow. The fluorescent lights in the break room suddenly felt too bright. Morty pressed the phone harder against his ear, as if that would change what he was hearing. "What do the doctors say?" "Experimental protocol at Johns Hopkins. It's her best shot." Jolene's pause carried weight. "Insurance denied it. $380,000, Morty. They're giving her 6 months without treatment." He thought of his checking account. $1,847 earned across 15 years of mopping floors at $14.50 an hour. He thought of Rita at 7 years old, learning chess moves on their kitchen table, her small hands gripping pawns while he taught her about controlling the center. He thought of promises he'd made before the divorce, before the layoffs, before he'd become the kind of father whose daughter stopped taking his calls. "I'll figure something out," he said, knowing it was a lie. "You've been figuring things out for 8 years, Morty." Jolene's bitterness was familiar territory. "You were always there for everyone's messes except your own family's." The line went dead. Morty sat in the empty break room surrounded by vending machines and safety posters, holding a phone that had become just another piece of useless equipment. Rita hadn't spoken to him in 3 years. Not since he'd missed her college graduation because he couldn't afford the bus ticket to Baltimore and was too ashamed to tell her why. He returned to his car at 2:47 a.m. and found himself near Vault C7 just as Vincent Reeves emerged from the security office with the head of security, a compact man named Bruno Castellano. They were deep in conversation, voices carrying in the empty corridor. "The quantum encryption is state-of-the-art," Bruno was saying, "but the synchronization delays during vault rotation are a nightmare. 10-minute window where C7 is completely dark." Vincent's frustration was evident. "Corporate says it's unavoidable. System has to reset between cycles. At least it's only the decommissioned currency. We're burning 200 million next month anyway." "Still makes me nervous," Bruno replied. 10 minutes is a lifetime in security terms. They disappeared around the corner, leaving Morty standing motionless beside his mop bucket. Through the reinforced glass, he could see pallets of banded cash stacked 8 feet high. Old bills too worn for circulation, condemned to incineration. Money that had already been written off, marked for destruction, waiting for flames that would reduce it to ash. The math was brutally simple. They were burning $200 million. Rita needed $380,000 to live. The vault would be electronically offline for 10 minutes during rotation. The maintenance override code, 774926184351, was burned into Morty's memory from that discarded log he'd found 3 weeks ago. He'd worked assembly lines before the 2004 layoffs, 12-hour shifts building components for machinery he'd never see completed. The work had taught him to notice patterns, to spot flaws in systems, to understand that every process had vulnerabilities if you paid attention. Taking this janitorial job had been survival, nothing more. But survival was exactly what Rita needed now. Morty watched through the glass as a forklift moved another pallet of condemned currency into position. The moral calculation formed with the same methodical precision he applied to mopping floors. His daughter's life measured against money destined for destruction. They were going to burn it anyway, incinerate it, turn it to smoke and ash and forgotten numbers in a federal ledger. Would it matter if that money saved Rita first? He pulled out his cheap spiral notebook, the one he used to track which bathrooms needed supplies, and started documenting. Vault rotation schedule, guard patrol patterns, the exact timing of Thomas Yates's coffee breaks, the construction scaffolding that blocked the camera's southern view. Every detail that his invisible existence had positioned him perfectly to observe. The decision didn't feel like a decision at all. It felt like the only thing that had ever made sense in 15 years of being nobody. The cheap spiral notebook became Morty's Bible over the next 3 weeks. He documented everything with the same meticulous attention he'd once given to assembly line quality control reports. Camera positions mapped by studying reflection angles on the polished marble floors. 16 cameras covering the main corridors, but the south service hallway remained blind behind construction scaffolding. Vault rotation schedules learned by pressing his ear against walls during cleaning, listening to the mechanical hum that signaled system resets. Guard patrol patterns timed down to the second, using the watch he'd bought at a pawn shop for $12. The building's forgotten infrastructure revealed itself slowly. Service tunnels that maintenance crews had stopped using after the renovation. An old freight elevator that still functioned but never appeared on security logs. The incinerator chute that connected directly to the loading dock where Morty took trash every night without a single inspection. 15 years of being invisible had taught him to see what visible people missed. The spaces between official procedures where reality operated on autopilot. The method emerged from pure logistics. His industrial cleaning carts could carry 4 96-gallon trash barrels without raising suspicion. Heavy-duty contractor bags rated for 150 pounds sat in the supply closet, requisitioned monthly for facility maintenance. Decommissioned currency came shrink-wrapped in $10,000 bricks weighing roughly 22 pounds each. $100 million meant 10,000 bricks, an impossible weight, but Morty didn't need to move it all at once. For barrels per cart, 8 contractor bags per barrel, for bricks per bag. The math worked out to $3.8 million per trip. 3 carts, 3 trips, 10 minutes total. The incinerator loading dock became the key. Trash went out every night at 3 a.m., destined for the waste management facility, and nobody ever looked inside the bags. Thomas Yates made it easier without knowing. The 62-year-old security guard complained constantly about the new system during their brief conversations. "Can't even get my damn coffee during the vault swap anymore," he'd grumbled one night while Morty mopped near the security desk. "Have to wait until rotation's complete. 12 minutes feels like forever when you need caffeine." Morty had simply nodded, filing away the information that Thomas took exactly 12 minutes for his 3 a.m. coffee and bathroom break. Every single shift, clockwork predictable. Patricia Okonkwo's trust was almost harder to bear. The night shift supervisor was raising twin 6-year-old boys alone after her husband's death 2 years prior. She worked doubles when she could, slept 4 hours a night, and survived on gas station energy drinks. By week 3, she'd stopped checking Morty's work entirely. "You're the only one who does your job right, Morty," she'd said, signing off on his timesheet without looking up from her phone where she was texting her babysitter. "I don't even check anymore." The dry run happened on October 16th. Morty filled contractor bags with shredded paper from the document destruction bins until each weighed approximately 90 pounds, close enough to simulate the real thing. He loaded them into barrels, positioned 3 carts near the service corridor, and timed himself during the vault rotation window. Loading dock to Vault C7. Simulated transfer back to loading dock. 8 minutes, 17 seconds. 43 seconds under the 10-minute deadline. The cameras reset during rotation but recorded timestamps, which meant he needed a legitimate reason to be in that corridor at 2:47 a.m. The solution was obvious. Create a cleaning emergency. Spill industrial degreaser in the women's restroom near the executive offices. Document it on his incident report form. Justify his presence anywhere in the building for the next hour. Nobody noticed the rehearsal. Patricia waved at him absently when he pushed the weighted carts past her office. Thomas was on his coffee break. The night processors in the counting room never looked up from their terminals. Morty returned the shredded paper to the destruction bins and went back to mopping floors as if nothing had happened. The phone call came 3 days later. Jolene's voice was hollow. "Lymphoma's spreading faster than they thought. Bone marrow's compromised. They're giving her 6 months without treatment." Morty. 6 months. He drove to University Medical Center the next afternoon. First time he'd taken a day off in 8 months. Rita was in room 447, her 23-year-old frame looking impossibly small against white hospital sheets. Her hair was gone, her skin translucent under fluorescent lights. When he entered, she closed her eyes and turned toward the wall, pretending to sleep, pretending he wasn't there. He stood in the doorway for 5 minutes, watching her breathe, then left without speaking. In his car, Morty pressed his forehead against the steering wheel and made the calculation one final time. He'd been invisible his whole life, on assembly lines, in his marriage, to his daughter. One night, just one night, he could make invisibility count for something. The final preparations took 2 days. 12 extra heavy contractor bags acquired from the supply closet during normal restocking. The vault access override code, 7749261843551, rehearsed until he could type it blind. October 23rd circled on his calendar in red ink, the date Vincent Reeves had mentioned for the next decommissioned currency burn. $200 million scheduled for incineration. Morty would take half, just enough to save Rita and disappear. The plan was complete. Everything hinged on 10 minutes of perfect invisibility, and invisibility was the one thing Morty Smith had mastered. October 23rd, 2019 started like every other shift. Badge scan at 10:04 p.m. Morty's thumbprint registering in the system with the same unremarkable beep it had made for 4 months. He retrieved his cart from supply closet B7 and began the familiar circuit. Executive offices first, emptying wastebaskets and vacuuming around desks where classified documents sat unguarded. By midnight, he'd moved through the bathrooms and break rooms, his movements automatic, a ghost performing the same choreography he perfected over 100 identical nights. At 2:38 a.m., the security panel outside Vault C7 began its countdown sequence. Morty watched the digital display from his position near the water fountain, mop in hand, looking like he belonged exactly where he was. Patricia Okonkwo emerged from her office, checked her tablet, then caught his eye. C7's going dark for maintenance swap, she said, more to herself than to him. She'll be back online by 2:58. She disappeared back in her office where her phone was already buzzing with texts from her babysitter. Thomas Yates stood from his security desk, precisely on schedule, stretching with the groan of a man 3 months from retirement. Coffee time, he announced to the empty hallway, heading toward the break room with the predictability Morty had counted on. 12 minutes. The window was opening. At 2:47 a.m., Vault C7 went electronically offline. Morty moved 3 cleaning carts in a position near the south service corridor, his hands trembling as he approached the vault door. The construction scaffolding blocked the camera's view exactly as he'd calculated. He input the override code, 774926184351, and held his breath through the 3 seconds it took the system to authenticate. The heavy door swung open with a pneumatic hiss that sounded impossibly loud in the empty corridor. Inside, pallets of banded cash stretched back 40 feet under harsh LED lighting. The smell hit him immediately. Old paper, ink, decades of circulation compressed into shrink-wrapped bricks waiting for incineration. His heartbeat was so loud it drowned out the ventilation system's hum. For a moment, Morty just stood there, staring at more money than he'd earned in 10 lifetimes. Money that had already been written off, condemned, forgotten. Then 15 years of repetitive labor took over. He worked with methodical speed, muscle memory guiding his hands as he loaded bricks of currency into contractor bags. 10,000 per brick, 4 bricks per bag, the weight familiar from 1,000 nights hauling industrial trash. Each barrel held 8 bags, $320,000 per barrel. 4 barrels per cart, 3 carts waiting, $3.8 million per trip. The math was simple. The execution was everything. Sweat soaked through his uniform despite the climate-controlled air as he filled the first cart. By 2:52 a.m., he was moving, rolling the loaded cart through the service corridor with the same unhurried pace he used every night. He passed Patricia's office, and she glanced up from her phone. Big cleaning night. Morty delivered his rehearsed line without breaking stride. Quarterly deep clean on the executive wing. Contractor bags are cheaper than having the service haul it. She nodded, already looking back at her screen. You work too hard, Morty. The loading dock was deserted. 30 seconds to transfer the bags into his 15-year-old Honda Odyssey, the minivan suspension creaking under sudden weight. Back inside, heart pounding against his ribs, checking his watch. 6 minutes remained. He could do this. The second trip went faster. He was halfway through loading the third cart when Thomas Yates reappeared early, walking past with a fresh cup of coffee. Morty's entire body went rigid, but Thomas just smiled. You ever sleep, Morty? Somebody's got to keep this place clean, Thomas. Morty forced his voice steady. You taught me that. Thomas laughed and waved him on, disappearing around the corner. By 2:56 a.m., the final load was transferred. $100 million in physical currency now filled Morty's minivan like garbage bags waiting for the dump. At 2:57 a.m., he closed the vault door, cleared the override code from the system, and returned the cleaning carts to storage. The cameras were coming back online as he moved through the blind spot, badge in hand, walking toward the parking garage with the same tired shuffle he used every morning. Security footage would show exactly what it always showed. The janitor leaving after his graveyard shift, another invisible man clocking out. Badge scan at 3:02 a.m. The system registered his departure without comment. Morty drove east on I-15, away from the neon sprawl of Las Vegas, his hands gripping the steering wheel, so tight his knuckles went white. He kept glancing in the rearview mirror at the contractor bags filling his van, half expecting sirens, helicopters, roadblocks. But there was nothing. No alarms. No pursuit. No consequences. Just a ghost carrying ghosts of currency through the desert darkness. The storage unit in Henderson, rented 3 weeks prior under the name Robert Finch, waited in a climate-controlled facility off Boulder Highway. Unit 217. At 3:47 a.m., Morty began transferring the money, stacking 12 large contractor bags against cinder block walls painted institutional beige. When the last bag was in place, he stood alone under fluorescent light and looked at $100 million. There was no celebration, no triumph, just profound silence and the certainty that he'd crossed a line he could never uncross. He locked the unit, drove to his studio apartment, and stood under the shower until the water ran cold. The alarm was set for 9 a.m. He had to work his next shift tomorrow night, maintain the routine, stay invisible, give them no reason to look twice. Phase 1 was complete. Now came the hard part, disappearing. For days after the heist, on October 27th, a routine audit discovered the $100 million shortfall. By noon, the media had descended on Silverlake Federal Reserve like locusts. Federal Reserve heist. No forced entry. No suspects screamed the headlines. Cable news ran endless speculation about sophisticated criminal networks and inside jobs. The FBI assigned Special Agent Carla Mendez, a forensic accountant who'd built her career tracking money through the impossible labyrinths people created to hide it. Internal investigation began immediately. All 247 employees were interviewed, their finances scrutinized, their lives turned inside out. Morty's turn came on November 1st. He sat in a windowless conference room across from Agent Mendez and answered questions for 15 minutes. Yes, he worked graveyard shift. No, he hadn't noticed anything unusual. His savings account held $1,847. He drove a 15-year-old minivan. He lived alone in a studio apartment that cost $600 a month. Mendez dismissed him as an unlikely suspect, her notes reading, "Subject shows no signs of financial stress or unusual behavior." On November 2nd, Morty gave his 2 weeks' notice. His explanation was simple. Mother in Tulsa needed care. Nobody checked that his mother had died in 2003. Nobody questioned why the invisible janitor was leaving. His final shift came on November 15th. Patricia Okonkwo handed him a $50 Visa gift card and smiled with genuine warmth. "You were the best one we have, Morty. Don't be a stranger." He left behind everything that identified him as Morty Smith. The studio apartment with its thrift store furniture. The Honda Odyssey with 200,000 miles on the odometer. His entire documented life reduced to a forwarding address in Tulsa that didn't exist. Converting $100 million in physical cash required patience and the same methodical planning that had made the heist possible. Structured deposits below reporting thresholds. Truck stop money orders purchased in increments that triggered no flags. Prepaid cards loaded at Bitcoin ATMs scattered across 3 states. False identities purchased through dark web marketplaces that Morty navigated with the cautious precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime noticing things others missed. The irony wasn't lost on him. His invisibility, the curse that had defined his existence, made him perfect for disappearing. Nobody remembered his face well enough to identify him from security footage. He was a ghost haunting his own life. In December, he sent $50,000 through a medical charity foundation that specialized in cancer treatment funding. The money reached Johns Hopkins anonymously, designated for Rita Smith's experimental protocol. Jolene called his disconnected number 3 times, her voicemails confused and hopeful. Rita began treatment 2 days before Christmas. Morty watched from the hospital cafeteria, baseball cap pulled low, nursing cold coffee while his daughter walked past within 4 pull. She was thinner than he remembered, bald from chemotherapy, but fighting. He wanted to speak to her, to tell her he was sorry for every broken promise, every missed moment. But he couldn't. The first crack appeared in his armor then, a thought that would haunt him for years. What's the point of saving her if I can't be her father? The next 2 years became a catalog of temporary identities and forgettable places. Billings, Montana from January through April 2020, working as a gas station attendant under the name Robert Finch. The COVID-19 pandemic arrived, and masks made invisibility even easier. He sent monthly payments for Rita's treatment and lived in an extended-stay motel where loneliness ate at him like acid. No friends, no connections, no identity beyond the lies he told to strangers who forgot him by morning. Des Moines, Iowa brought a hardware store clerk position as William Pruitt. Rita's treatment was working. Jolene's Facebook updates became Morty's obsession. Each post about shrinking tumors and improving blood count of validation he couldn't celebrate openly. The temptation to reach out crushed him. Late-night phone calls where he dialed Jolene's number and listened to her voice without speaking. "Morty, is that you? Where are you?" He'd hang up and move again, always moving. Redemption. Arkansas became the closest thing to home he'd known in years. Population 4,200, the kind of small town where strangers stayed strangers unless they chose otherwise. He worked at Harlan's Diner as a dishwasher, calling himself Eugene Morris, renting a room above the hardware store from a widow named Beverly Grant. At 67, Beverly had buried a husband and raised 3 children who'd scattered to bigger cities. She treated Morty like family. Sunday dinners, conversations on the porch, something resembling normalcy. When Rita entered remission in April 2021, Morty celebrated alone in his room with tears he couldn't explain to anyone. But Agent Mendez was patient and methodical. She'd spent 2 years tracking financial patterns, cross-referencing every employee with medical expenses and family illnesses. The connection emerged slowly. Morty Smith's daughter had received $340,000 in anonymous charitable donations. His disappearance, timing correlated perfectly with the heist. Forensic accounting traced cash conversion patterns across 8 states. Truck stop money orders, prepaid card purchases, Bitcoin ATM transactions. By August 2022, surveillance analysis and pattern recognition had identified Redemption, Arkansas, as his likely location. Morty's journal entries from that period showed a man deteriorating under the weight of his own success. "I saved Rita's life, but lost my own," he wrote in September. "She's alive and I'm a ghost. Which of us really survived?" Nightmares plagued him, visions of being invisible even to his daughter, of saving her only to watch her marry and have children he'd never meet. Weight loss, insomnia, depression that Beverly noticed even when he tried to hide it. "Eugene, you carrying something heavy," she said one Sunday. Heavier than dishes. The breaking point came on October 12, 2022. Rita's wedding announcement appeared on Facebook. She was marrying Christopher Lane, ceremony scheduled for January 14th. Morty read in his room above the hardware store, staring at photos of his daughter, smiling beside a man he'd never meet. The realization gutted him. He'd saved her life, but would never walk her down the aisle, never be part of the future he'd sacrificed everything to give her. What'd I do this for? The question echoed in the darkness. He had $100 million and nothing worth having. 6 days after reading Rita's wedding announcement, Morty was wiping down counters at Harlan's Diner when Special Agent Carla Mendez walked through the door at 6:30 a.m. He recognized her voice before he saw her face. The same clipped professional tone from his interview 3 years ago. She sat at the counter, ordered coffee and apple pie, made small talk with the waitress about the weather. Morty's hands froze mid-wipe when she turned to him with eyes that had never stopped searching. "You make a good dishwasher, Mr. Smith," she said quietly. "Better than you were at being invisible." She didn't arrest him. Instead, she slid a folder across the counter while the other early morning customers ignored them completely. "I want to understand. $100 million. You lived in motel rooms, eating ramen. What?" Morty looked at the folder, Rita's medical records, treatment timeline, the wedding invitation printed from Facebook. His voice came out rough from disuse. "My daughter was dying. Mendez studied him with something that might have been respect. You save her life with stolen money. The Bureau wants their money back. What do you want? The offer was straightforward. Full cooperation. Explain the methodology. Testify to security failures. Help them recover what remained. In exchange, reduce sentence. Immunity for Rita, so the money already spent on her treatment wouldn't be reclaimed, and a guarantee she'd never know the source of those charitable donations unless Morty chose to tell her. The alternative was arrest, trial, full prosecution, and Rita learning everything through a media circus that would destroy the peace he'd bought her. If I cooperate, Morty asked, can I see her? Once. Before prison. Mendez nodded. I'll arrange it. Over the next 4 days, Morty gave his detailed account of the heist. FBI investigators sat in stunned silence as he explained the 10-minute window, the cleaning carts, the contractor bags filled with condemned currency. You just walked out with it? One agent asked, disbelief evident. Morty had simply nodded. The simplicity was the genius. There was no sophisticated technology, no elaborate planning beyond understanding that invisible people see opportunities visible people miss. They recovered $67 million from storage units scattered across 6 states. The rest had been converted, spent, vanished into the same ghost network Morty had built to save his daughter. Mendez's respect grew with each revelation. You could have lived like a king, she said during one interview. You live like a ghost. I've always been a ghost, Morty replied. At least this time it mattered. On October 25th, Mendez arranged the meeting at Johns Hopkins Medical Center. Rita was in remission now, working as a patient advocate helping other families navigate the nightmare of cancer treatment. She walked into the private conference room, expecting another insurance consultation, and froze when she saw Morty handcuffed to the table. Agent Mendez said someone wanted to... Dad. First word she'd spoken to him in 5 years. Morty felt something break inside his chest. Hi, Rita Bug. The conversation was everything and nothing he'd hoped for. He apologized for disappearing, for every broken promise, for not being there when she needed him most. He didn't tell her about the stolen money. Let her keep believing the charity was real, that her survival hadn't been built on his crime. Rita's anger came through tears. Where were you? I needed you and you were gone. I'm sorry I wasn't there, Morty said simply. But I'm here now, and I'm not running anymore. Are you in trouble? Yes, but I'm where I need to be. Rita cried then, really cried, and asked the question that would change everything. My wedding is January 14th. Will you be there? Morty looked at Mendez, who nodded. I'll be there, even if they have to escort me in handcuffs. Rita's tentative smile was worth every consequence waiting for him. Just be there, Dad. That's all I need. The trial moved quickly. Morty pleaded guilty to federal theft charges. Prosecutors sought 25 years, but his defense, appointed by the FBI as part of their cooperation agreement, argued mitigating factors. Rita refused to testify against him. Jolene's testimony carried complicated anger mixed with grudging understanding. Beverly Grant flew in from Arkansas to serve as character witness. That man worked harder than anyone I knew. He had demons, but he wasn't a demon. The judge's ruling came in January, 12 years in federal prison, with credit for cooperation and acknowledgement of Rita's medical crisis. You committed a serious crime, the judge said, but you also exposed critical security failures. And you did it for a reason I cannot fully condemn, even as I must punish it. Morty's response was immediate. I'll serve every day. I owe that much. On January 14th, 2023, federal marshals escorted Morty to a small ceremony in Baltimore. He walked Rita down the aisle in handcuffs, wearing a suit borrowed from the prison chaplain. She gripped his arm like she'd never let go. Thank you for being here. Nowhere else I'd rather be. They got 3 minutes for a father-daughter dance, 2 guards watching from the corner. Christopher Lane shook Morty's hand afterward and said something that made the handcuffs feel lighter. She talks about you. More than you know. Morty returned to custody that evening. In a transport van heading back to Federal Correctional Institution Butner in North Carolina, he smiled genuinely for the first time in 4 years. Prison became something unexpected, a place where Morty was finally visible. He taught GED classes to inmates, wrote weekly letters to Rita that she answered religiously. Beverly visited quarterly with homemade pie. Rita came every other month, sometimes with Christopher. Agent Mendez sent a Christmas card. You did the right thing in the end. That counts. In March 2024, Morty wrote in his journal, I spent 52 years trying to disappear. 15 years invisible at work. 3 years invisible on the run. It took stealing $100 million to finally be seen. But the only person who needed to see me was already looking. I just wasn't there. Rita's alive. She's happy. She knows I tried. That's more than I ever gave myself credit for. I was wrong about one thing. You can't steal freedom, but you can earn it back. One day, one letter, one choice at a time. His parole hearing was scheduled for 2031. Rita was pregnant, his first grandchild due in August. When she told him during a visit, Morty made a promise he intended to keep. I'll be there. Not as a ghost, as a grandfather. In a prison library one afternoon, a young inmate watched Morty teach a reading class and asked afterward, what were you before this? Morty considered the question carefully. Invisible, he finally answered. But I'm learning to be seen.